Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Paul Adepoju, and I'm the community manager for the ICFG's Terminal World Forum on Global Crisis Reporting. And if for the past couple of days, the major crisis that has been getting a lot of attention is the issue of climate change from different parts of the world. And it is not something that is unusual because this has been a topic which we have been consistently and regularly focusing on this forum. And we've been trying to encourage, empower, and enable journalists from across the world to be able to better understand the issues, make sense of it, and be able to write topical stories that are relevant and that are true depiction of the state of the crisis, especially for their local audience. And today, the goal of this webinar today is to enable you to better understand what is happening right now in Egypt, probably some of the key issues that you may need to focus on in your reporting. How can you get your reporting on the way, irrespective of where you are, and how you can actually maximize the tools that are within your reach. And that's why today I'll be your host, taking you through different aspects of issues that I think should be relevant. Around this time last year, I was at COP26 in person in Glasgow, Scotland, and from where we actually hosted a live session. And I took those that attended that webinar. The video is still on YouTube. You should probably check it out. And through behind the scenes of what the experience looks like, especially for journalists. And one of the hallmarks of that particular session, of that particular experience for me, was the realization of the truly overwhelming nature of hosting and covering a global event such as the United Nations Climate Change Conference. And I began to ask myself, because sometimes, even for journalists, one of the best ways where you can get your story leads at COP, as a COP event, would be the press conferences. Because apart from that, most of other sessions are well orchestrated. They were well organized, really restricted. And even those that are involved in the various negotiations may not even be willing to give you really in-depth insight on what is happening. So at best, your best shot to be able to get in contact with those that are coordinating, that are the real stakeholders, would be at press conferences. And even those press conferences, sometimes you can have 3 or 4 of them happening concurrently at different venues that are several meters or don't let me say kilometers, several tens of meters apart, and you cannot be in 3 different places at the same time. So which means I will be shocked if anybody would say he or she or they are able to actually cover all of the entire sessions, and which means you have to be able to specifically pick what issues you are going to cover, how you are going to cover it. So right there and then at the media section at COP26, I decided that what would be the experience if I decide not to go and have that in-person experience and decide to cover it virtually. And that's something I've been able to do today and this year, and I'll be taking you through some of the things that I think is really important for you to take note of. So I want to welcome you for joining us on this experience from different parts of the world. As usual, we are always interested in knowing where you are joining us from. So if you're in the chat box, if you're joining us on Zoom platform, please interact with me and let me know where you are joining us from and what your thoughts are regarding COP27 so far. And if you're also joining this live stream on Facebook, whether it's on IGNet's Facebook page or the community forums, our community's forum page on Facebook, I also welcome you to this exciting and probably hopefully high-opening experience for you. So one of the things that I would like, one of the hallmarks, something that people often look forward to at COP events, is the World Leaders Summit, which is where we have lots of world leaders making ambitious speeches. This is where many journalists get their buzzwords and the hook lines of in terms of the speeches that global leaders are making in regarding climate change. This year was not an exception, and we had lots of different world leaders and that actually spoke at this COP event. And I would like to give you a snapshot or a brief nutshell of what really happened and what some of them said on the first at the World Leaders Summit at COP27.
It is time for nations to come together for implementation. It is time for international solidarity across the board.
We've been forced to grow, to act, to think like adults, because we cannot watch as our future is shut, our dreams put to an end, our home, Mother Earth, burning, hitting in droughts, and we do nothing. The time to force action is right now, right here at the African COP. I believe we can do this together.
ولعل ما شاهده على مدار العام من أحداث مؤلمة في باكستان وفي قارتنا الأفريقية وفي أنحاء متفرقة من أوروبا وأمريكا. لعل تلك الأحداث وما خلفته من دمار تمثل عبرة وعظة وصوت نذير يتردد في شتى أنحاء كوكبنا.
The simple political will that is necessary not just to come here and make promises, but to deliver on them and to make a definable difference in the lives of the people who we have a responsibility to serve, seems still not to be capable of being produced.
We have a credibility problem, all of us. We're talking and we're starting to act, but we're not doing enough. It is a choice to continue this pattern of destructive behavior.
The heart of implementation is everybody, everywhere in the world, every single day, doing everything they possibly can to address the climate crisis.
So comments like these are quite familiar, synonymous with the World Leaders Summit. And I believe the goal of this summit, of that particular aspect of the event, which often seems to attract lots of attention because of the caliber of the participants and speakers, is always to drive attention to the urgent nature of climate response. I remember when at COP26, when the day that this happened, it was, you have to queue the day before it, queuing to get to enter the main event. We usually spend like 30 minutes, 1 hour because of the security checks. But for the World Leaders Summit, because that was when the world leaders would be there, we spent hours because we had the US president, we had lots of world leaders from across the world in attendance. And that was actually when there were lots of journalists that were actually interested in covering what individual presidents that took the stage on that day would say. And today, this year's edition wasn't an exception. And one of the consistent speakers is the president of Barbados, and she spoke eloquently last year. And it was quite interesting to see that she was also able to speak again. And why are these calls really important? And I think this is an aspect where it's really important for me to raise some issues that could actually be of interest to you. There are some key controversial, or let me say, not controversial, but debatable issues at COP events that countries continue to argue on what to do, how to do it, and how much to do it. And one of such is the issue of money. Money is money is always you always find money as a topic involved when it comes to climate action. How is this so? Where one of the key buzzwords you'll be hearing is the loss and damage. For instance, we have countries that are being affected, severely affected by climate change. And because we know some of the countries that are the world's heaviest polluters, that are the ones that are emitting lots of these greenhouse gases, they are the ones that are contributing mostly to climate change. The debate is that the countries that are responsible for mostly for climate change, are the ones that are emitting most of the greenhouse gases, should be the ones footing most of the bills. And now, why that seems to have been accepted, like, okay, yeah, we ought to do something. How much? There's always a debate around how much is enough. We have figures being thrown around. Initially, they were saying $100 billion over a period of particular year, within a particular period of time. Then we are still seeing reluctance. Initially, the limit when this was supposed to be achieved was initially changed. Then it went to another issue again, and so we always have that. Then this year we also see, because there are one of the things we know, the major contributors to climate change. It includes actions like fossil fuels, coal, which many countries still continue to rely on. Actually, in Africa, that is hosting COP27 this year, while the rest of the world is encouraging other countries to embrace clean energy sources. We still have, for instance, a country like Nigeria still heavily relies on oil exploration for its revenues. We have countries in South Africa that still use coal as energy sources. And interestingly, many countries are even still have outstanding contracts for coal factories. So which means those that are at the forefront of promoting clean energy are aggressively telling these countries to get rid of these non-clean sources of energy. But this year, in the months leading to COP27, we began to see African countries coming together to say that you can't just say we should stop using this. We still need, because we are also still fighting poverty. We still have development challenges. So the goal now is trying to see ways to incorporate fighting poverty and accelerating development in the countries that are still heavily dependent on non-clean energy sources to be able to actually get on board. And another thing that was still on that topic that is worthy to mention, which is what some activists call the hypocrisy at COP events, is the fact that we are also seeing some companies that are actively involved in this, especially the oil companies. They are also making appearances at COP events, and so they always, so there is this accusation of greenwashing. Greenwashing simply means you tend to, greenwashing means you are trying to, even those that are things that are not safe for the environment, you are still finding a way to polish it and give them that appearance that they are safe for the environment. And Greta, the popular climate activist, decided to boycott, and now she will be boycotting COP27 because of the fact that she believes that COP events are increasingly becoming avenues to greenwash this country. So those are some of the controversial issues that we continue to see how they play out at COP events. And another thing that many journalists often put their focus on, and I think that you also may be interested in, is your individual country's commitments towards net zero. Do I need to actually explain what net zero means again? Okay, net zero simply means that COP26 really did a lot on me. Those terminologies were strange to me before COP26, and now I'm just rolling them out. So when we are talking about net zero, it's all about ensuring that the carbon that you are not contributing, the carbon you are contributing, your work that you are emitting, you are also taking it out of the environment in one way or the other. For instance, if you, let's say you are, so that's just a basic principle. And what this, an approach that many countries are taking, and of course, even companies too, are taken is that when they calculate the amount of carbon emitted during what you've done, CO2 emitted during the activity, and they invest some money in efforts to clean up the environment that mops up CO2. For instance, some get involved in tree planting. So we always see many of these announcements being made at such events. So those are the kinds of things that generally people often look forward to at COP events. And for you that you are covering at home, how can you, if you have any question, please use the chat box to engage me. And I think quick shout out to everybody. I can see this is a truly global audience joining us from different parts of the world. And so the first thing I would like to show you is if the easiest way to get access to reliable, to authoritative and quick sources of information regarding a COP, the conference, is this. I often start from Google. So when you go to google.com, the easiest thing you can do is just to search for COP27. So when you search for COP27, so it brings up, there are two key websites that you can see that is going to give, we have the hosting countries, we have COP27 because Egypt is a country hosting COP27 this year. So this is the website that the country has launched. So, but you just have to be, you have to be very concerned. And ordinary search for COP27 even increases. For instance, remember what I said about for the oil companies, the fossil industry, also getting involved in negotiations. We are also having it happening at this particular COP. For instance, if you look at the stories by BBC, The Guardian, they reviewed that there is an increase in the number of fossil fuel lobbyists at the climate summit. So that is happening. It continues to be a key issue, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. So when you sign for COP27, the website of the host country is this, COP20 Egypt. So this is where, just once you click it, it takes you to the page that the government of Egypt has set up as the official website for the conference. However, you will not, you cannot really get much from this website, because even though Egypt is a country hosting it, is actually a United Nations event. So what you should look out for is a small United Nations climate change logo here. And that is what you can actually go to, unfcc.int. That is the website of where you can actually see, get some insights regarding, so the United Nations official website, unfcc.int, this page is where you can actually, if you're interested in official documents that are being shared, official deliberations that are being shared, this is where you can go to. So you can actually look at the sessions. You can get documents on the sessions and everything, and you can actually see different events are happening, but we are more interested in COP27, then you can actually see the fact that they've actually broken it down and helped in categorizing the various documents. We have COP27 agenda. You have the different sessions that are happening. You can look at what is happening, the different topical issues that are happening, the latest documents that are being released. I'm just saying this because for me, there's now I do my own climate change reporting. But if you just want to cover COP the most boring way, this is the way for you to do it. You can just be looking at it. Why did I call this the longest way? Even this is there. This for me could be the longest way for you to cover COP because you're actually just saying what is being said and there, what you are being told at it. So if you want just to get access to the official documents, yeah, you can do that. But if you really want to have an interesting COP reporting experience, two places that I would recommend is tracking the press conferences, the press briefings. I'm seeing a lot of good questions. I'll answer those questions. Please keep your questions going, but I just want to still provide some guidance for those that are covering from home. So that's going to the UNFCCC website.inc to get the latest document, the agenda adopted. Yeah, it's nice, but everybody will also be doing that too. And they mean that that approach too may not really be locally relevant for you, which is why it's really, really important for you. For me, when I was there, when I was at Glasgow COP26, I found the press conferences to be more useful for me in getting really insightful story leads. And I was able to write a number of really good stories from them. And why do I consider the press conference more important? Because we know how press conferences work. They'll first say what they want to say. And by the time of their session, of their talking points, journalists often have the opportunity to directly engage, ask questions, and be able to get something that is really real, original, and quite somehow not what official positions would be. So that's an approach that I think you can take. And we always have these press briefings are also live streamed, for instance, but you just have if you look at the agenda, so it's really good for you to check out the agenda, because when you check out the agenda, you know which press briefing is happening, who is attending, who will be speaking at which press briefing, and so that you can actually have a concrete plan on what your line of question would be. I remember when I was doing my home COP event, the COP26, I was at the launch of a report by the World Meteorological Organization. And even though they were just interested in the report, I can just say, okay, WMO launched this report, but my audience is the African continent. So I had to go in at that session because we had the Secretary General of the World Meteorology Organization. I had to go in by looking at a specific threat to Africa's food security crisis. It has always been an topic of interest for me. So that was what I mentioned. After they said everything they wanted to say, I was able to actually directly and actively engage with him on this topical issue. Then at the end of that session, I also embellished what I got from that session from activists and spokespersons that are always interested in having their thoughts and opinions and comments on these issues. So that is a different way for you to have a very, really real and rich COP reporting experience. So you've got to identify which of these sessions are of interest. Even though you are covering from home, they often take questions from virtual attendees. And if they are not taking virtual attendees questions, of course, there could be some discussions that a journalist can actually raise that is asking questions that could also be of interest to you. So that is an approach I took, which is attending press conferences and getting as much as I could get from there. The other approach, which I think is really, really underrated, but in this present age, is really, I think I consider it very, very relevant, is Twitter. because everybody wants to let you know that they're at COP. Everybody wants to say that, yeah, I'm currently chilling at COP. And every organization, every person that is speaking, anything that is, any article that is written in connection with COP will always be shared. So for me, I considered Twitter to be a very, very useful tool for me to be able to track what is happening. So let me show you how that's done in a minute, but I think you can have an idea of what I'm trying to say. So if you just want to have a general understanding of what is happening, an ordinary COP search, just search for COP27 on Twitter, you'll be able to have a general overview of what is happening, the general conversations around it. But I think I'll just share my screen and so that we can, for those that a lot of you would already have experience on how to do this already, but it's something that is really useful for me because this serves as, so I just say COP. So when you search for COP27 like this, it brings out it pulls all the conversations, all the tweets that are being shared. And why am I saying this is really important? Now you can see, even before you could get all these insights, you know the number of reports you have to go through. For instance, you can see these general insights, and you can actually know what is happening on each day. Everybody is saying whatever they want, and you can actually, I think you're having an idea of how, can you see it? You can see in a vast array, different angles, different topical issues, from politics to health, from health to environment, to speeches, even videos, specific videos on this topical issue across different sectors. But now, if you are from a particular country, let me look at the comment section and see if you are from a particular country and you're interested in what is happening regarding at COP27 regarding your country, you can just now narrow it specifically to your country, and that gives you some level of sieving. Let's say I'm looking for what Nigeria has been up to, what Nigerian delegates have been up to at COP27. Then it's really, then we can see the Nigerian government, the Nigerian president 6 hours ago published an opinion piece in the Washington Post. As a Nigerian journalist, I might be interested in what my president is saying. You may not have access to him directly to interview at COP, but you can have an idea of what is happening. And so you can see what your country has been up to by taking this approach. You can see the different developments. So I always see my Twitter sojourn for COP event as a wide fishing expenditure. And why is this so? Because if you are reporting in real time, you can actually still be able to get access to people that are actually talking about this. For instance, if you sort this out by looking at the latest, clicking the latest icon, you can actually see individuals that are talking about this issue almost immediately. And if that is of interest, if there is a latest announcement regarding your country or what your country's delegates have been up to, you can quickly see it. And if it's from an expert, we can actually, before everybody starts paying for blue tick, you can reach people up, do some background check, and be able to identify whether this person is an expert. If somebody is posting a tweet like 10 minutes ago, you're definitely sure that if you can just directly engage with that person on Twitter, you'll be able to actually have an idea of what is happening right there in Egypt. And you can also get expert opinions, expert comments on topical issues that are relevant. I've written a number of really good stories by using this fishing approach, and I've also gotten a lot of ideas. For instance, look at that piece on the number of fossil fuel industry lobbies. you can look at it that, and I think I saw that they are from different countries. You can look at whether there are representatives from your country. That's a really good story you can do. And yeah, so those are the two wide approaches for you, to three different approaches for you. Then another thing that is also important is this activists, climate activists are always interested, are always attending these conferences, and they also are usually willing to talk to journalists, because there are lots of climate activists. So you have a better chance of actually talking to one or two of them, especially if you are not somebody that only wants to talk to the Greta or to other popular climate activists. So it's really, really important for you to be out there searching and developing connections. And one of the mistakes that many journalists do make is they think COP is only for climate change topical issues alone. But my experience covering this conference has made me to realize that it's actually bigger than just climate change alone, but you can actually still write stories on different aspects of the environment. So it's a really, really good expedition place for you to talk to experts and get insights for your environment focused stories, because whether it's renewable energy ecosystem, whether it's pollution, whether it's whatever aspects of the environment, experts are always there. And if you are registered, officially registered with UNFCCC, some of these organizations would actually be sending you insights and, of course, updates. For instance, protests. Some journalists do love covering climate protests. Me, I am not a big fan of protests, but you will always find this information sent to you, your email. And by the time you look at them, they always want to promote those kinds of protests. And so if you want experts if you want activists to speak to, they are always in abundance. And thanks to COVID, everybody knows that many journalists will also be virtual, and so you can easily still reach out to them. So irrespective of the country you are in, you can use these different approaches for you to know what your country has been up to gain insights, and to also identify experts. A key topic issue that I think is important for me to also raise is how you should be cautious, the reason why you should be cautious, what's the cautions that you need to take when you are covering announcements, those announcements being made at COP27. For instance, a country might just say, yes, we are making these commitments to do so and so by this period. That automatically becomes the headline. And but you have to be very cautious. Why is newsworthy? You are not the only person that is covering it from that angle. So which is why you have to say take some few steps back and ask yourself, how can I do this story differently? And one of the things that I think, one of the strategies or one of the overlooked approaches is comparing previous promises made. For instance, COP26 only happened last year. Billions of dollars were promised. So if new billions of dollars are being promised, if new alliances are being forged, a good story will be what is different, and what is the progress of the approaches or the alignment or the agreement or the accord that your country signed on to at COP26. How far have they gone with that thing? And I'm seeing a lot of similar such stories happening increasingly, because even the attention is on COP27 this year. COP28 is happening next year in Dubai. More, and of course, is still in UAE. So more promises will also be made at COP28. More promises at COP29, COP30. A lot of promises will continually be made every year. So a really good story will be to track those kinds of promises. How are they adding up? which percentage of those promises are being fulfilled, what is your country doing, and what are the unique solutions that continues to emerge. So you can actually look at the environment ecosystem from a broader range so that we are not just parroting and hyping what is really, really important. And so you have to be very, very, when money is announced, when big promises are made, you have to be very, very careful so that you are not just amplifying what they want you to amplify and it dies like that. And so your journalism should be differently done. And another thing that I think is really important is figuring out ways to write stories that really matter. I believe you just have to be strategic. And most of the stories that matter are those that have human angle, human face. At COP events, climate change event, big numbers. You can be hearing words like the world temperature is rising by 2 degrees. The world something. But to the general public, except those that are really, really been following these issues, they may not know the significance of 2 degrees C centigrade change in global temperature. But it's a big deal. Scientists will continue to parrot it and amplify it. The UN and these agencies, climate change experts will continue to re-emphasize the reason why we need to be serious about this. So which is the reason why human-facing stories, angle stories are really, really important. Even though we don't see this, we may not be able to, if you are not intentionally seeking out those kinds of stories, they may be happening all around you and you may be missing them. For instance, in Africa, like I said initially, Africa is having lots of floods this year. And floods, I remember the World Meteorological Organization's report that was released last year. Flooding and droughts were among the threats, climate change threats that Africa is facing. So that justifies it. So instead of you just saying floods, hundreds of people are dead, 1.5 million people are displaced, why not look for one person that is directly affected? And now that becomes the face of the story. And from that kind of approach, you can now add the implications of why that kinds of negotiations, those kinds of issues need to be prioritized. So it's really, really important. And a lot of journalists are already doing this. A lot of journalists are already changing the way they are, because the big number approach doesn't seem to have worked effectively. And everybody will be saying the same thing. Everybody has the same access to global data. And the only way you can make a unique story out of it is to directly find people that are directly affected by these issues in your country, in your locality. And then your readers and your audience may be able to associate much better with this issue. So it's really, really important for you to be able to do this. Then one thing that okay, let me quickly answer some questions. Thomas is asking, Paul, I'm working on a story from Kenyan president's speech and look beyond what he addressed. One issue I picked was on the need to increase forest cover and plans for planting 5 billion trees in the next 5 years. How do I make it human interest away from the speech? That's a really, really good question. So Thomas, yeah, 5 billion, but be absolutely sure all the media houses in your country would things so. Okay, so while all the media houses in your country, that could be the talking point. Yeah, even you can also, if you want a quick story, yeah, if you're a freelancer like me, we want the quick box. Yeah, we can do that. But what you now need to do is you can look at what is the plan. Yes, you can talk to experts that what will be needed to be able to achieve this. And what kind of trees is the country going to be planting? What is the plan? Because, yeah, a good suggestion I will give you is this. many of these reforestation or forestation approach is actually seen by experts as very wrong, because they are planting the same species of trees, and which is actually wrong for the which they believe is also wrong for the environment. So you can talk about it from the cost implication, where the land will be gotten from, and whether similar promises have been made in the past. You can actually look for tree planting initiatives that your country is already involved with. How many of such promises? I think I know Africa has a major tree planting initiative. How many of those trees are the country planted over that period of time? So, and talking about humans, we can talk about the part of your country that is directly affected by this issue. How are they currently coping? What do they urgently need? Will these are there those that really need something urgently, immediately, that they may not be able to wait until the government comes up with its plan? So these are the different areas that you can actually exploit, and I hope I think you can yeah, so those are the ideas that I can give you. But it's really, really important to put face to it. Who are those that are directly affected by this issue that the president is saying? Do they believe that this is going to bring any more change? And what are their immediate needs? So those are the issues that I think you can actually take on as a journalist. Yes, like I said, what Swati said, Thomas on this, you might want to find out what kind of trees, yes, where and how many jobs that might generate. Experts may say that trees should be endemic to that region. So environmentalists would have some opinion. Yes, they have to reach out to the experts, like I rightly said, to weigh in on this approach. And also, who is going to provide the trees? Who has the capability to deliver that amount of trees in your country, and whether, if you have an idea of how much that will cost, you can also compare it whether the cost of that would actually offset the needs. So those are the approaches that you can take, and I wish you good luck. So one more issue that I think is also important as they cover climate, the COP27, is climate activists will be making lots of claims that this thing, that there is always this, I see it as the doomsday narrative. Yes, climate change is an existential threat to humans, but it's not everything that you associate with climate change. And it's always important to talk to experts. I cannot overstress it enough. It's always important to talk to experts. A few days ago, while looking at, yes, it is well documented that climate change results in flood. And there is a direct relationship, there seems to be a relationship between flood and food insecurity, because ideally, when you look at how floods happen, especially in some countries, like in some African countries where farmlands are flooded, it simply means that crops are destroyed. And it simply means that food security in those kinds of countries may be threatened. And we may accept that that is the truth. That is how it plays out. But you should always talk to experts, because there may be some relationships that are obscured, that may not be well stated out, and so that you are not just amplifying whatever you are being told. So let me give you a good example of how to do this. So in the weeks leading to COP27, I read this article was published that talked about the impact of flooding on food security across Africa. And it was interesting to me, because, and this is, I think this would also be a tip for you to actually be searching for researches in your country, in your region of interest, that are connected to the issues that you are trying to cover. So when I read this article, I saw this paper, scientific papers can be complex, but it was quite interesting to me because it began to open my eyes to the fact that even though this issue we are talking about is we already expect that there will always be a negative effect between there will always be a negative impact of flooding on food security. Sometimes it doesn't happen the same way that you expect it to do. So what I decided to do was to reach out to the researchers that actually did that, worked on that paper. And I had a conversation with them on why this could actually be of an issue. And it was quite eye-opening. And I would like to, let's see whatever. And they actually told me that it's not in every case, because we have countries that are able to withstand, introduce some measures to convert that flooding into something that is actually good for agriculture. So it's not a necessary follow.
Sure.
So let's start with the first thing that came to my mind was the fact that we are not, we are already expecting flooding to have effect. And so what was the justification for still going ahead with this study? What were you looking forward to seeing uniquely while going into the study?
Yeah, and I'll just flag too that our colleagues Connor and Weston are now here as well too, and joining the call. Yeah, so I think it's a good question, right? And I think that's kind of what led us to want to ask this. I think intuitively we expect that flooding is not great for food security, and can impact food security, and that's in fact what we've been hearing a lot about. My colleague Weston here and Andrew both work with flooding and, well, the famine early warning system and flooding respectively. And so I think we have been interested in previous work that Weston can talk about. We were interested in sort of setting a baseline, trying to understand the scale of the problem, right? We understand and intuitively we think and we know that flooding impacts people at local scales, but we were curious to see, well, does that also have an impact at slightly larger scales? How does, looking at a local area versus a region versus a nation state, how do the impacts vary across those domains? How big a problem really is flooding for food security specifically? We know flooding impacts a lot of other things too, right? But for food security specifically, it's actually quite difficult to find information at the intersection of flood impacts on food security. And so we wanted to just get a sense of scale of the problem. And I think we intuitively know what would happen, but I don't know that we hadn't seen prior to this information, particularly across at the continental level, right, of what these impacts look like. So for us, I think our first major question was, how big a problem is this really for food security? Can we quantify it? And can we set some kind of baseline, right, of expectation for this? And I'll let my colleagues chime in too on that.
Yeah, I think what I would add is that, or highlight from what Sonali said, is that the ability to measure how drought impacts food security in many ways is much easier, because droughts are easier to observe, they're larger, they're slow onset, slow demise sorts of hazards. We can really get a very reasonable estimation using satellite-based estimates, ground-based estimates of where a drought is developing, how that's affecting crops, and therefore how that might affect livelihoods, food access, all the pillars that then affect food security. For flooding, the complexity is that it's much more localized in both space and time, and that's Andrew's area of expertise, and that its impacts on food security are much more varied. So it impacts access, availability, and utilization, right? There are these different pathways where you can directly destroy crops, you can destroy someone's livelihood, you can kill livestock, and you can also propagate vector-borne diseases that might affect utilization of food. So there's a hazard that's more difficult to identify, that's more spatially localized in time and space, and has these somewhat more complex pathways to affecting food security, which isn't to say that drought isn't complex in its own right, simply that we can observe it a little more easily. And all of that meant that the question of scale was important and more difficult to get a handle on, which is what we were asking. We were specifically asking, given these complexities, what can we say about these events across Africa as a whole over this entire decade?
Yeah, I have a question. I think it's really good you mentioned Andrew as the flood expert. There's always this theory that almost any bad thing, climate change would result in any bad thing, you can associate it with, there may not be any good thing that will come out of a bad situation. Now, talking about food, the food aspect of association with flood, why is flood peculiarly positioned to connect to result in food crisis compared with other factors that can also result in this outcome? Of what threat is flooding in the scale of anything that can result in this food crisis?
Yeah, I'm glad to jump in on that. But actually, first, I want to see if Connor, do you have any thoughts on this before I jump in?
Take it away, Andrew.
All right. So I think something to start with is that one of the reasons why we convened this team is that we do have different areas of expertise and specialization. However, the flood relationship and the flood influence, let's say, on food security, we discussed it in a variety of ways, both in terms of theoretically how can floods potentially influence food systems and food security, but also reflecting on our own experience. You know, our own experience working in different places, being asked to comment on the impacts of climate broadly on food security. In my case, much of my work is with the humanitarian community, and I've been in country with a variety of humanitarian organizations for both flood preparedness and flood response. And the question has come up many times in different ways. How can these floods be forecast? What could the impacts look like? And specifically, what actions can be taken? And it's irresponsible to prescribe actions unless we understand not only the impacts from the floods, but also things like the extent of the impact, the magnitude of the impact, the duration of the impact, also indirect impacts as well as direct impacts. So that's something that we do talk about here in the paper, and note that we need much more work on this. Understanding not only how floods could wash away crops, for example, but what happens in other parts of the country where there is a flood and infrastructure that is critical to the movement or processing of food, perhaps. How does that impact the food security, let's say, context in a country? So that's where Sonali was talking about the scale, and Weston talking about the scale of things. This is important. And sure, it would be easier if it was simple. And we could say things like, when we have a flood at any place in the country, the impacts on food security would be X, Y, Z. But that's not the case. We need to be more careful. We need to be more responsible. And we need to be clear about what the data can tell us and what the data can't tell us. Something we definitely need more of is more disaggregated data in terms of flood type. We have data right. Yeah, go ahead.
Finish, please.
Oh, no. Well, and the reason why is that different types of flood have different impacts on food security. And also the impacts exist over different spatial scales and time scales depending on the flood type. I will also say, in terms of forecasting and projecting floods looking ahead, we use different methods to do that as well. So there are various factors, various reasons for calling for more detailed documentation of flood both from a climate and geophysical perspective, but also from an impact perspective.
Yeah, talking
Yeah.
about, okay, sorry, please.
No, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, Paul. Yeah, you
No,
guys
no,
go ahead.
no, I want to hear from you. I'm here to hear
Yeah.
from you.
I was just gonna quickly just build on something Andrew said, and I think having Andrew's perspective on, from particularly from the humanitarian sector, was really important on this. I think for me, what was surprising, and maybe should not have been surprising, but what was surprising was that in the modeling that we had done, that Connor had really led, the impacts for a given flood variable, so this duration, extent, occurrence, right, was not always negative. And that's not to say that I think what that highlighted for us was more of what we don't know than what we know, and in many ways. And I think this issue of scale, right, is something we keep coming back to, and both the scale at which you ask and answer this question, right, the local versus the regional, national scale, and then also temporal periods, right, and what happens in the direct aftermath of the flood versus maybe some time thereafter, right? And what the kinds of assistance and adaptation are. So in sort of one bucket of new questions that this opens up for us is what kinds of data and disaggregation across flood type is really clear that that's something we need, right? What kinds of data that do we need at the intersection of flooding and food security that we're missing? That's one bucket of questions that we're now trying to tackle. The other bucket of questions is that, floods at certain scales don't always have to mean food insecurity, right? But what needs to happen in order for that to be true, right? What are the adaptations that need to take place? We're nowhere near being able to prescribe them, right, as Andrew said, but the fact that there is this mediating role for institutions and for other things that we found within the qualitative reports, right, which I think is another component to this that I wanted to just quickly flag, is there is an interesting role here that's kind of buried in our supplement of expert opinion in terms of how famines evolve and what or just food insecurity evolves, that we found pretty compelling, and it was actually something that came out more in the review process. But there seems to be some veracity of expert opinion here that we've discovered, or that maybe was known in the humanitarian community, but we're seeing is valuable from a data perspective, that we've started to use, right? And I think also it brings up questions insofar as adaptation is concerned, and what are the limits of adaptation depending upon the flood characteristics, right? We don't expect, we expect damage in Pakistan, for example. There's flooding happening in Nigeria right now, right? That we expect to incur damages. What are the potential ways around that, right? And that's not something that we directly revealed in the study, but definitely is sort of, it's embedded within the data we were looking at. And we really need to tease that out.
Yeah, I'll come back to Andrew. I know Andrew wants to run over, but I still have one more question for you from the mic. But when I was reading your paper, an experience that what this brought to my mind was something that a session I attended at COP26. And it was this interview that I did with the World Meteorological WTO Secretary General. And it seems as if what you are presenting further enhances and supports everything we know about how Africa is affected by climate change, considering the fact that it's always around flooding and high temperature. Then I also remember this report from the Food and Agricultural Organization, and it also aligns with it that flooding destroys food and all of those things. So let's talk about briefly what your study is adding to the current available database regarding how flood impacts food security in Africa. And like you said, you knew what you are expected to find, but what were the specific things you found, and what really stood out regarding your finding that you think ought to actually jump out and everybody ought to be aware of? So I'll come back to Andrew with the humanitarian question.
Okay.
I think Weston can take that, or anybody else can take that question.
Sure. Yeah, and after this, I have to run. So something that those reports don't have is well, the intention is not for them to try to quantify the relationship, first of all. So it is something that we think is important, and it hasn't really been done before, and especially in this way. So those reports are useful for, I mean, what is the intention of those reports? You know, like the FAO report or some of the Red Cross reports. The intention is to raise awareness. The intention is for advocacy. The intention is to bring funds for response. Almost all the time is for response. There's very little done on how do we understand flood risk to take actions before a flood happens to decrease and or mitigate impacts on food security. And that's something that really hasn't happened yet. I mean, even for drought, very little has, I mean, I shouldn't say very little, but we should be doing more. You know, I mean, there are systems and programs designed for that, but yet we are still seeing these crises in many parts of the world. So one of there is an opportunity, as you highlight, the WMO is prioritizing early warning systems for everyone globally. That's an opportunity, but there's also risks involved. It would be a step back if we don't ensure that action is integrated within those early warning systems. We get alerts on our phone all the time. You know, who pays attention to them? I study these things for a living. I still don't pay attention to them. You know, we need to have real reasons to take actions, and many times that means resources, and it also means discernment. It means making statements of where we shouldn't take action in addition to making statements of where we should take action. If you warn a whole country, for example, it's not really useful because there's going to be funding and resources available for some places before others. So we need to think about that too, the disproportionality, and where do we take action first, and how do we deprioritize areas in the same way that we prioritize areas.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
I'll leave it there. Yeah. So I could follow up over email. I hate to run, but I have to.
Yeah, I think, okay, you can run.
Okay, take care.
Yeah, so I think what I'm trying to achieve there is to let you understand the fact that everything does not stop with what you are told. Even if you have an exclusive, even if you have a major announcement, even if they have all of those bold claims, it's really, really important for you to talk to the scientists. That is where I believe the stories lie in. And it's only when you have those kinds of conversations that you can truly, truly inform your audience on what should truly, truly matter. So my recommended approach is this: open-mindedly look out all those resources, all those tools. There are lots of reports that are being launched at COP27. You can actually just Google reports COP27. You'll see lots of them. But it doesn't mean that you are just going to stop at that level. As you can see from those experts, it doesn't mean once there is this condition, this is expected to happen. Many of these issues also have vacuums, knowledge vacuums that they do not fully comprehend the true status of that relationship. It doesn't mean, and those are the things that are really, really important for you to bring to the attention of your audience. I really spoke extensively with those scientists, and it's so easy to set up those kind of things because you just have to look for experts that are publishing articles on those topical issues, then have a Zoom call with them like I did and discuss these issues, ask for their opinions and what should truly, truly matter. Then by the time you put all of this together, that is how you can actually write a story that you are truly confident of regarding its factual status, and further adds to the audience, and you are very accurately sure that you are presenting the complete picture of the situation, not just what you are given at COP27 or what PR officials want you to put out there. And so good question. Last question that I'm going to take is from Swati. He said, thanks for very useful advice. Also, how and where to access copyright-free images and footages from the COP for media stories would be good to know. That's a really, really good question. The answer is go to UNFCCC website, UN's official website. During COP26, I saw UN's web staff that were with cameras and were recording, and they all usually upload these footages online to UN's website. Check out unfcc.int. Also, you can check out their pages, their social media pages, and they are actually reported by the UN. Those footages are recorded by them, and with the right attribution, they have their own copyright instruction, but mostly you can use them by accurately attributing them to the person that shot it. So just check out their website on guidance on how to use their footage, and that's the only one I think you can easily access. And yeah, or if there are press events, if some particular sessions are recorded, all of these live streams are there for you to use, and you should be able to use them. So thank you very much for that question. And one last issue that I would like to touch before we call it a day is the issue of what happens after COP27. For me, I always look at my story reporting from a strategic point of view. I always want to take something on, and because you cannot report on every issue that is mentioned at COP, and I only believe it should bring your attention to issues that you should be following. For instance, if you had not known, if you didn't know about loss and damage before, if you didn't know about the impact of climate change before, the specific impact that you ought to be tracking for your reportage, I see those kind of conferences as an eye-opening opportunity for you to know the issues to truly cover. And environmental issues are happening all around you, and they are really important for us to keep our attention on, such that it's not just at big conferences like COP that we are now talking about, that we are only talking about climate change, that we are talking about environment. What of pollution? What of contamination? What is happening in your environment? What about renewable energy? How is the renewable energy sector in your industry, in your country faring? What about solar energy? Is your country doing anything? What are the promises that your country signed up to during the conference? How do you follow up? You can write follow-up stories that what has happened 2 months, 3 months later, the issues, those that are expected to directly benefit from those promises made. How are they faring? Are they still getting those kinds of attention? And those are the kinds of issues. Then who are those that have been directly saddled or that are working on the issues that were mentioned at COP27? How far have they gone with the promises that they've made? Those are the kinds of stories that you should be able to actually talk about even after COP27. And there is no better way to give you an example of how this is done than for me to share the beautiful story of one of our forum members who a few days ago was named West Africa's journalist, won the West Africa's Journalist of the Year award. And when I checked out a really impressive story, it made me realize that it's not just onto a big climate change conference is happening that you should be waiting to write such an impactful story. Every day around us, we are faced, there are people that are actually struggling with issues that only get transient attention, probably just within 1 week during the COP event. So let me introduce Tessie Igomo. Tessie Igomo is a forum member, and we are very proud of her achievements. And so she won, like I said, she won the West African Journalist of the Year award at the recently held West African Media Excellence Award. And I'm going to use the award-winning story as an example of the kinds of story that you can actually write any time of the year, irrespective of whether it's at COP or at any other conference. So the story, okay, the story started with in the Nigerian community, I think. Okay, this is a story. This is the award-winning story. Is about how a community in Nigeria. Okay, Tessie works with a major Nigerian newspaper called Punch newspaper. So this was a story that actually got her the award on how a community was choking under a Chinese recycling plant fume. And it was how a community had been struggling with emissions from that particular plant for at least period of 3 years. You can see the pictures, the suits that were, she went to the community and saw this. She brought attention to it. She described the scientific process behind what the factory was doing, and how this is the hands and feet of the locals, how these emissions actually affected them. She actually used the face towel to clean her home face. You can see how dirty the face towel was. One of the community residents actually had heart issue that was somehow really connected to the emission in that environment. And so a lot of there has been, the community was aware, and even the establishment was aware of the negative impact that what they were producing had on the residents of the community. So this story, she visited it, and she actually extensively did research and did the reporting. Eventually, the government decided to close that factory down, and she went back for a follow-up story. And because of relocation, and I think this was a follow-up story that she wrote stemming from that experience. My point is that this issue, this topic, should not just be something that you cover. It's not something that you should just be passionate about because there is a major conference that is happening. Environmental issues are real life issues, and environmental issues are not just an issue that we can completely report within 1 week. It's something that is consistent, and the only way that you can do it differently and actually succeed at writing such kind of stories that will be really, really impactful is for you to actually be passionate about the kinds of stories. As you can see in the story of Tessie, she had a passion for the affected community, and she was interested in seeing this through, not just parroting an headline that was released at a conference, but putting face to the issues that had. And you can actually win laurels for your story. So this is a good example of how to truly do stories that may be connected to COP, but not just at COP. And they are everyday stories, considering the fact that climate change is an existential crisis, and environmental issues are also directly affecting people every day. So a few days ago, I was on a call with her. I congratulated her, and there was something she said about why she does what I think is different regarding the way she does her own investigative story, that I think is something I would like to share with us. Let me see if that video will play. Yeah. So everything she mentioned was about passion. She mentioned everything she mentioned was about you being passionate about what you do, and being fully committed. So here is something that what she said, and I think it should be a motivation for you?
I put myself into every story to bring out the best in it. And in doing such stories, what drives me mainly is that my story should have impact, should impact positively, you know.
So yeah, and that's very simple. It's all about impact. It's not just, it shouldn't just be about you writing a story and going away with it. It should always be about impact. And that is what I'm going to encourage you to do, to drive you in whatever you do. Talking about celebrating impact, we are later tonight, ICFJ will be hosting our tribute to journalists. ICFJ's tribute to journalists is actually happening tonight. It is our, I call it ICFJ's biggest event of the year. And so it's a celebration of journalism from different parts of the world. And I encourage you to be part of it. I'll be watching, and I will also be tweeting, and I will attempt to also post on the page as much as I can. The celebration will be hosted by Will Blizzard from CNN. And one of the recipients is Andre Mitchell, who is the Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent for NBC News. And we also have awards to be given in different categories: Innovation in International Reporting, ICFJ Knight International Journalism Award. We also have the ICFJ Knight International Journalism Award that is going to a television reporter in Afghanistan, and several others. It promises to be a celebration for journalists. And if you do not know about this, and I encourage you, is a way for you to actually have fun, relax, and be inspired. Events like this inspire me personally, and I encourage you to be part of it. So you can actually get free virtual attendance tickets by clicking on the link that I put up to quickly register. So thank you very much for joining me on this session. I hope you've been able to learn one or two things, and I hope I've been able to give you one or two tips that would be useful in your, not just in reporting COP, and not just environmental journalism, but as a journalist in general. And thank you very much. To learn more about our forum, I encourage you to be part of our Facebook community. Check out our Facebook community. Let me quickly get the link to our Facebook community right now. So you can just click, and you're going to join our Facebook community. That's the link to our Facebook community. Just click the link, be part of us, and I'm going to accept it. And we share lots of tips, lots of insight, resources, and information about forthcoming sessions, and lots more. So please just click that link, be part of it. And to know more about the International Center for Journalists, this forum, this initiative, the ICFJ Forum on Global Crisis Reporting, I encourage you to check out the forums page on the forum on www.icfj.org. And I'm always encouraging our journalists to check out lots of resources to improve their journalism practice by checking out IGNet's website on www.ignet.org. And till next week, when we'll be talking about another topical issue that is important. And I will also be joined live by several guests. I say thank you very much. If you are using any of our resources and you want us to get, if you have any information that you would like us to know, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always on Facebook. Just send me a DM or chat me up on Facebook, and we are going to share it. And this recording will soon be on our YouTube page very soon. So just be part of our Facebook page. I'm going to share the link with you, and that you can rewatch the video and to get through the video and all the content that we shared again. So thank you very much. On behalf of I say enjoy the rest of your day, and it's bye from me. Bye.